Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin. In California, the death toll is climbing, and the sheer magnitude is nothing short of stunning. At least 31 people have died in several wildfires burning at opposite ends of the state right now. To the north, Paradise is, the only way you can say it is lost. The picturesque town in the Sierra Nevada foothills is smoldering in ruins today. The so-called campfire is now the most destructive in the state's history. We want to show you some before and after pictures of the town. You're going to see them. They are just devastating. That was a church. Again, emphasis on was a church. A KFC, no longer after that at all. To the ground. More than 110,000 acres have burned. More than 200 people are still unaccounted for. And many more are now sharing their stories of getting out, the terror running for their lives in many cases.
I've never been this scared in my life. It's okay, Mama. Oh, God.
It's just horrible. In Southern California, high winds are expected today, which, of course, could make the fires even more dangerous. Today, thousands of homes have already burned. More than 300,000 people have been forced to evacuate. We have crews on both ends of the state for you this hour. CNN's Dan Simon is where the town of Paradise once stood. Let's begin, though, with Scott McLean. He's in Malibu, where the threat is very real still. Scott, what are you seeing there?
Hey, Kate, we've just got some updated numbers for you from authorities. This fire has now chewed through 91,000 acres. It is also 20% contained. That is good news at this point. It is continuing to grow, though, as these winds come through. These hot, dry winds come from inland and go offshore. That is not what you want to see, and it'll be like this way until Tuesday. This part of Malibu, it seems like the worst has come and gone. But look what it's left behind. There are many houses that look just like this one, absolutely destroyed. And you'll notice you hear running water. It's because the water has been left on. And there's a couple houses in this neighborhood just like that. In the initial stages this weekend, a lot of the gas lines were left on. The crews had to actually go door to door, property to property, to dig up those gas lines and try to shut them off. In many fires, you'll notice that you can kind of tell which room was which. In this case, it must have burned just so hot that it's really hard to tell what's what. It's hard to see really anything recognizable other than, you know, the chimney there and the fireplace and a couple of walls and things like that. Over here, you'll notice that the neighbor's house looks just like it. Same with the house next door and the one on the other side as well. What's amazing is that you'll have a couple of houses that were completely wiped out, and then next door you'll have a couple of more that are completely intact. It is certainly a bizarre sight to see. Again, Kate, the big worry here is those winds, those hot, dry winds coming from inland. They are expecting them to be in effect, the red flag warning in effect until tomorrow night. That means that conditions are ideal for wildfires to either spread or start up. Kate.
Yeah, it's absolutely the last thing they need right now. Scott, thank you so much. Just devastating where he's standing in Malibu. Let's go to Dan Simon now. He's in Paradise, where the sun is finally up there, and what you're seeing is just tragic, Dan.
Well, hi, Kate. This is really at a level and scale of destruction that we've never seen before in California. It's just unprecedented. This is just the most common sight you'll see all throughout Paradise. You have a neighborhood that's just, completely gone. And it's not just homes, it's restaurants, it's all kinds of businesses, it's schools, it's churches, it's retirement centers. Pretty much the entire town of Paradise is destroyed, and you won't have residents coming back here for many weeks, and that's just to go through the rubble. Who knows when people will actually be living here again? You talk to police officers and firefighters, and pretty much everybody says the same thing. Nobody has seen anything like this. Now, in terms of the numbers, we're talking about 113,000 acres. Paradise is 31 square miles, and pretty much every square inch of the town has been impacted by this. You have about 52,000 people who have been evacuated, and at least 29 people, Kate, have been confirmed dead, and you still have dozens and dozens of people who are still missing. So authorities obviously think that the death toll is going to go up, unfortunately. Kate.
God, it just came through so fast. Dan, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Joining me right now on the phone is Rick Mullen. He's the mayor of Malibu, California. He's also an 18-year veteran of the Los Angeles County Fire Department. I'm going to show you a photo. You're looking at a photo from the LA Times of Mayor Mullen surveying a house while he's on the job on Friday. The house clearly on fire. The mayor's joining me by the phone right now. Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you so much for calling in. How are you holding up right now?
I'm actually holding up fairly well. I've been here since the Thursday when the whole thing kicked off. The first couple of days were fairly exciting. I think the photo you're looking at probably is a good indication of the amount of intensity and work that went on in the initial stages. But we've been able to get a little bit of rest and food and water along the way. So we're actually doing fairly well at this point. It's calmer now all over than it was when the fire came through. So everyone's getting a little bit of a breather. But so a lot of people have been on the job for quite a while. So we're doing much better than we used to be.
Well, I mean, I guess that one good thing you can take from it is you've been able to get some rest, which is we're all very thankful for. But Mayor, when you were from that photo that we're showing and some of the video that we're showing our viewers, how would you describe what you've seen out there?
Okay, so the photo you're looking at was we were driving by a neighborhood which it's one of our that particular neighborhood is kind of like a regular suburban neighborhood where the houses are relatively close together, and the potential for one house catching the whole block or the whole neighborhood is severe. So what we try to do is keep the fire to the one house and not have it spread to all the other houses. I think the photo you're looking at, I'm peering over the wall,
exactly.
And we're trying to keep the fire on this side. When we got there, the flames were essentially licking up on the house next door, and we managed to save that house. And that's pretty much what happened for us that first day. Is we would go from that point, and then as we're rolling up our hoses from that scene, a neighbor came by and said, "You got to go up to that hill up there because that house is starting to catch on fire, and that whole row could catch on fire." So we zoomed up to another one and spent quite a bit of time doing the exact same thing in another house that was on a sort of a slanted road where the whole neighborhood could have gone off. But the problem is that you can't, when you normally would respond to a house on fire, you have all the manpower you need. You have maybe 4 engines, plenty of people, and you can draw on more. Here it's 3 guys, and everyone else is game on in their own little projects. So it takes a lot more manpower and labor, effort for each individual to keep the fire confined to one house. But I think that a lot of those efforts were fairly successful. And it's like you talk about, you see some of the neighbors, there are some places where a whole street got burned up. I think Wandamere was one of those. But a lot of the places, it's 1Z, 2Z houses, and each of those not spreading to the next house is an indication of a lot of effort by people who were there on scene to keep that. Because remember, it's not just a house on fire. It's a house on fire with a lot of wind blowing and blowing all of the embers, etc., all throughout the neighborhood. So a lot of effort by people to do that. Very tragic situation that we have here in Malibu. It's a beautiful town. Everybody loves it. It's Mother Nature when she's benign, is very gracious, but when she turns angry, she lets everybody know who's in charge, and then everyone's running for their lives. And life is our number one priority. And in the city of Malibu, we're very successful in nobody getting killed. There were 2 people who were killed in my district for my station, which is just outside the city of Malibu. And I went to that spot yesterday to look at it, and I don't know what happened, but I suspect what happened is at the key moment they panicked and made a decision to leave, and they put themselves in essentially an inferno. And at exactly the same time that was happening, I was down the street at a prison, a juvenile detention facility, and when I rolled up, was right when the fire was coming through the fire front. 35 people, 22 inmates and 13 staff were getting in their vans ready to go, and I made them get back inside because the prison was the safest place to be, and they stayed inside, and we stayed with them just outside the prison building as the largest fire I've ever seen in my life blow through a heavy brush area where the fuel hasn't burned in 50 years. But they were safe. And, I hear a lot of controversy about this Pepperdine thing from everybody, their decision to shelter in place. But what happened at the prison is what happens when you stick with the plan of sheltering in place. And Pepperdine is a very defensible spot, and I'm not sure what all the controversy is about there, but sometimes you have to shelter in spot. And I think that instance with the prison, there could have been 35 people who met their deaths as they're trying to get out in the canyon roads. But unlike that, they stuck with the plan. I told them to get back inside, and they made it out okay. So life is number one priority. We've been successful in dealing with that. Now we have to pick up the pieces, and it's going to be very difficult for everybody. And now we move into the part where the city is going to do everything they can with all the assisting agencies to try and help everyone put their lives back together. Once we do let everybody in, we're going to set up a center at the old Malibu courthouse in the center of town where people will be able to deal with FEMA, Medicare, DMV,
and there's so much to that. But what you're saying is the most important thing, which is first and foremost, when flames are still flying and people are still in danger, the most important thing is protecting life first. And this is still a real threat in many places. What is happening right now, the weather could contribute, not yet ready to settle down, could make it even worse. Could continue the danger and the threat going forward. And that's why a lot of folks are talking about what the president, his first response to this. And I know that you've been too busy and probably don't even have the time or patience for politics right now. But when you're talking about the most important thing is to protect life, and that's what you really should be caring about, his first response was to criticize and blame the state for poor forest management. When you heard that or saw that, what did you think?
You were right what you said, and I don't want to get into national politics at all. I have been unaware of all of that stuff. We're just focusing on our job at hand. I think it's probably an inappropriate time to bring, political issues into this. We've got our hands full. We're dealing with it. We're doing the best we can. I'll worry about that stuff later. But I want to say that I really appreciate, when you're talking about the federal government, they've reached out to us to help us out. We appreciate that help. The state has reached out also. The county, everybody's working together. We thrive here in Malibu because we have good working relationships with every other agency that we interact with, whether it be Caltrans or the state or the federal government. So we sincerely appreciate the help that we've gotten from everybody, to include all the communities that have sent fire engines down here. I've seen them from as far away as Northern California, and I really appreciate the help that everyone has given us, and it's a community effort. And this has been a difficult thing, but it's the paradox of living in Malibu. It's a beautiful place, and everybody knows the danger, and that's the risk of living here. But Malibu is a close community. There are people who are going to feel very relieved that their house made it, and there are people who will be devastated that their house didn't make it. And we're all going to come together because Malibu is a team, and Team Malibu will ride again. We've taken it on the chin, and we've taken some serious damage, and we're going to get through it, and we're going to put the pieces together. There are still parts of, and in the past, in these other big fires, like in '93, it started the 101, and it did, a certain amount of area. But this one started much further up. It came on a much broader front, and it did much more severe devastation. There are still parts, particularly east of Malibu Canyon Road, that have not burned, and there are some wind issues coming up. So I know everyone's chomping at the bit to get back into their homes. I appreciate that. My intention is to try to get everyone back in to be able to pick up the pieces as quickly but as safely as possible, and also in a controlled manner.
It is. It's safety right now. You don't need another emergency on the back end of this. So, Mayor, thank you so much. Right. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Coming up for us, lawsuits and claims of fraud flying around Florida right now as officials race to recount ballots in what's becoming nail-biter races, if they weren't already. At least one county says it will be impossible to meet the deadline. So now what? Details ahead, plus new satellite images that show North Korea is not playing ball when it comes to its ballistic missile program. Stay with us. Nearly a week since Election Day, but in Florida, it's still anyone's guess who will come out on top. More than one race is too close to call. Right now, we're going to show you live pictures of volunteers racing to finish recounts for both the Senate and governor's races before a Thursday deadline. The top election official in Palm Beach County is already telling CNN, though, it will be impossible to finish in time to meet that deadline. And there's one person who thinks that there shouldn't even be a recount. The man in the White House this morning, President Trump, taking to Twitter to say that the Florida election should be called in favor of Republicans, Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis. He also goes on to allege that ballots showed up out of nowhere and ballots are missing or forged. To this point, the state has not announced any investigation into any issues like that. CNN's Rosa Flores is at the Broward County Elections Office, the site of one of the, let's just say, the most contentious recounts. Rosa, where do things stand right now?
Kate, there is a cloud of controversy hovering over Florida. And one of the counties under the microscope, of course, is Broward County. We have seen lawsuits, protests, barbs, jabs in every direction. Let me start with the lawsuits, because Governor Rick Scott filed 3 of them yesterday, one of them against Broward County, alleging that votes were counted after the Saturday noon deadline. And then the other 2 are against Broward and Palm Beach counties, asking that after the recount, that law enforcement should impound the voting machines. Now, the Democrats also filing their own lawsuit today. They are asking that all of the mail-in ballots that are postmarked November 6th should be counted. Now, this is after a mystery box with 266 ballots was found at the Opelika processing facility. Now, if that name rings a bell, it's because it's the same processing facility that processed the pipe bombs not too long ago that were sent to CNN and critics of President Trump. Now, they specifically mentioned in that lawsuit that there was an evacuation on October 25th that could have impacted that. Now, fueling the fire, of course, is Palm Beach County. The supervisor of elections there saying that it is going to be impossible for her to finish the recount on time to meet that Thursday deadline. And then the Republicans fueling the fire by alleging fraud, saying that the Democrats are trying to steal this race. Now, we have asked the Secretary of State and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and they say that they have found no fraud. They have found no criminal activity. But, of course, we are monitoring all of that. And, Kate, the deadline here is Thursday at 3 p.m. All 67 counties in Florida are counting these ballots, and there's more than 8 million of them. Kate?
Great to see you, Rosa. Thank you so much. Let's see what happens minute by minute, I guess. So how is this all going to shake out? Joining me right now are 2 men who know a little bit about Florida politics. Adam Smith is here. He's a political editor for the Tampa Bay Times. And Florida-based Democratic strategist Steve Schale is here. He was the Florida State Director for the 2008 Obama campaign. It's great to see you guys. Thanks for being here. Adam, you told me last week when we spoke that at least when it comes to the Senate race, that we could be headed to, I want to make sure I quote you correctly, Lord knows what, never, never land of Florida recounts. Do you feel any differently today?
Well, it's always Lord knows what, never, never land in Florida elections. But I think it's inevitable, yes, we are headed to a recount in that Senate race. And we actually have another race that's an agriculture commissioner race nobody's paying attention to outside of Florida. That's also a manual recount as well.
Steve, last week, the governor asked the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to get involved and investigate any wrongdoing. They did so, and they said that the Secretary of State said there was nothing to investigate. Now, the State Attorney General is asking them to investigate any wrongdoing, and still the Secretary of State's office, who is a Republican, says there is nothing to investigate. So what is going on here? I mean, could law enforcement really get involved here, or is this just about messaging?
I mean, God, I hope not. I mean, you know, after 2000, the state did some things right, one of which was set forth a really clear process for these recounts. And as Adam said, it's going to take a long time, 8.2 million ballots. It's, you know, Palm Beach County has to count them one election at a time, which is why it's going to take them a little longer potentially. So it's going to be sort of a slow, tedious process. But the law is very clear in sort of how it gets done. And, you know, if folks have, you know, a fraud they know of, they should report it, and it should be investigated. But sort of throwing out all these conspiracy theories does nothing but just question the legitimacy of the whole process. And
Adam, I mean, there seems to be growing consensus among politicos and people who are watching this that mistakes have been made. Incompetence may be a problem, particularly in Broward County, which has left me kind of wondering why Governor Rick Scott has not or had not removed these election supervisors from office before now. I was going back and looking, you know, Jeb Bush did that back in 2003, I think it was, over incompetence. That's how Brenda Snipes in Broward County, Brenda Snipes first got her job. Why? What's the story there?
Well, I think it's not probably, it's fair to say it's not maybe incompetence. It is clearly incompetence, and it's happened over and over and over again. And that's a question that, you know, Jeb Bush actually appointed her, like you said, but then she's been reelected several times, right, facing all kinds of criticism. You're absolutely right. Rick Scott could have removed her from office. You know, now it certainly would be extremely awkward for him to do it in the middle of this. but he's got to answer that question, and so far he's not been willing to.
Well, and Adam, even to that point, he was actually asked on Fox News this morning this question, and he didn't have an answer to it. He just says she's been reelected, and she's elected on the local level. And he did not answer this question, which I find fascinating, Adam.
Well, if you know our governor, he's pretty good at not answering questions over and over again, which maybe is a skill, but I think it's hard to say for him to say that this woman is incompetent or worse when he had the authority to get rid of her a while ago.
Steve, the next big deadline, as Rosa Flores was laying out, is 3 o'clock on Thursday. The machine recount needs to be finished. Palm Beach County is already saying that they think it's impossible to finish by then. So is that how this is all going to play out? Which is, and if the understanding is, or the law is, if it's not finished and it's not done, then the existing number stands, which is what they had on election night, if you will. I mean, if that is how this plays out, is either side going to accept that answer? We don't have enough time, so we can't get it done?
I think we're going to have to find out, unfortunately. I mean, again, Palm Beach County uses a different system, which is why it takes them longer to get through this process. The system has been certified by the state. They're legally allowed to use it, but it's just slower. But we're going to find out. And then, frankly, once we get to the hand recount, there's about 120,000 vote difference between the lowest race in the recount and the highest race in total votes. That's a lot of ballots to be inspected by hand. So getting this done by Saturday is going to be an interesting challenge.
Let's see who's up for the challenge, and the challenge of us keeping track of it all along the way. Adam, Steve, I really appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much. Coming up, they have not officially taken over the House yet, but top Democrats are already setting their sights on Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker, even threatening to subpoena him if necessary. How both sides are preparing for this upcoming battle. Top Democrats are preparing for a fight and sending a not-so-subtle threat to the Acting Attorney General. Matt Whitaker must recuse himself from overseeing the Mueller Russia investigation, or else. Here's the likely next chairman of the House Judiciary Committee just yesterday.
Well, the very first thing, obviously, is to protect the Mueller investigation. The president's dismissal of Attorney General Sessions and his appointment of Whitaker, who's a complete political lackey, is a real threat to the integrity of that investigation. That investigation is of utmost importance in making sure that we adhere to the rule of law and that the administration is held accountable. And we will certainly hold hearings on that. And our very first witness after January 3rd, we will subpoena or we will summon, if necessary, subpoena Mr. Whitaker.
Democrats like Jerry Nadler there pointing to Whitaker's past statements critical of the Russia investigation as disqualifying. So what kind of fight is this then setting up to be? Joining me right now is CNN senior political analyst Mark Preston and CNN political analyst and Washington bureau chief for the Daily Beast, Jackie Kucinich. Great to see you guys. Mark, what's this fight over the Mueller investigation, or maybe at this point the Mueller report, going to look like when Democrats eventually take over the House?
Well, it's going to look entirely different than what we're seeing right now, which was certainly from the House side. We saw Devin Nunes, who was an ally of President Trump, protected him. And we didn't see a vigorous oversight, certainly from the House Intelligence Committee. What we're going to see, though, from Democrats now is we're going to see the likes of Adam Schiff, who's likely to be the chairman of that committee from California, Democrat, who's going to be very vigorous in this. We saw Jerry Nadler right there from New York, who's going to be very vigorous. Richie Neal from Massachusetts as well, because there's taxes involved. He's going to take over the Ways and Means Committee. He's going to be very vigorous. What's interesting about these three gentlemen, though, is that they are been around on Capitol Hill for a long time and don't expect them to go off on wild goose chases.
But I love a wild goose chase, just as a hunter. Never mind. Jackie, I interviewed Jerry Nadler on Friday night. He said something else about this that grabbed my attention about the investigation. He said essentially that Democrats, they might want to demand that legislation to protect Bob Mueller be part of negotiations over government funding coming up. Listen to him.
We could insist that that be a condition of passage of the remaining legislation to fund the government, which has to be done by December 7th.
So you're going to hold it hostage?
I wouldn't call it holding hostage. But I think the future of constitutional government is at stake here, and we must go a long way to make sure that the president is a president, not a king.
Is this going to become a thing, Jackie?
You know, I think Senator Chuck Schumer stopped short of saying that they would shut down the government over the Mueller probe, but it certainly could be. There are going to be factions in this Democratic caucus, particularly the new ones that are coming in, who really do want to take it to the president, both on the Mueller investigation and several other areas of oversight that have not been exercised under a Republican Congress. It'll be up to Democratic leadership, though, to be the guide and to have a sense of strategy so it doesn't look, I can't remember where I read this, like a T-shirt cannon situation with subpoenas and indictments. They'll need to have a roadmap to make this look like something that has an end.
That is quite a visual, a T-shirt cannon of subpoenas. I will not forget that, Jackie, and I will give you attribution since we don't know where we got it. Mark, this Wall Street, we'll find it. Mark, this Wall Street Journal reporting, though, that the president was involved in or knew about the hush money payments to a porn star and a Playboy model every step of the way during the election. That has Jerry Nadler now talking about impeachment in a way that he had not before the election, and other top Democrats, it seems. What's changed? Is it just the election, or is it this report in the Journal?
Well, look, I think they knew all along. Certainly the evidence was leading up to that. At what point did he know, I guess, is the real big question. But we heard, the audio recording from Michael Cohen. But what has changed now is that you have seen the likes of Jerry Nadler, who has the power now to compel people to actually come in and testify. Democrats didn't have that before, but now they do have it. But to Jackie's point, too, and I think this is very important, Democrats can't go into the next 2 years of just going out and investigating and trying to take down Donald Trump. They're going to have to try to show that they can govern as well, and we'll see if that can happen. But that's a big, big chore on Nancy Pelosi's shoulders.
Absolutely. Mark, Jackie, it's great to see you guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Kate.
Coming up for us, President Trump back in the White House after his trip to Paris, a trip marked by a face-off over nationalism and also blaming the weather. So, where does that leave the Trump doctrine today? That's next. First look at possible new threats from North Korea. Commercial satellite images appear to show at least a dozen undisclosed missile sites around the country. This despite promises from Pyongyang to dismantle its weapons program and work towards denuclearization. Remember that? This all is coming from a new report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And this comes just after President Trump assured reporters that U.S. sanctions against North Korea were working. Listen.
We're in no rush. We're in no hurry. The sanctions are on.
You still expect to meet Kim Jong-un?
Excuse me, wait.
Sorry, sir.
The sanctions are on. The missiles have stopped. The rockets have stopped. The hostages are home.
Joining me right now, CNN Global Affairs analyst and senior fellow on the Council of Foreign Relations, Max Boot, and CNN Global Affairs analyst and former Deputy Secretary of State under President Obama, Tony Blinken. Great to see you guys. Tony, hidden bases in North Korea. Analysts saying that any missile at these bases, coming from these bases, could take a nuclear warhead. What does this mean for the progress that President Trump says has been made?
Kate, it means that the art of the deal is really the art of the steal in North Korea's favor. Everything that the president told us was happening with his great success in negotiating with North Korea is not happening. And the North Koreans have talked about dismantling one of their missile sites at the very time when, in secret, they're moving forward, apparently, with 16 others. So the challenge here is this. I'm glad that President Trump moved to diplomacy and was seeking to engage North Korea. It's better than the fire and fury we were looking at a year ago. But you've actually got to get something for that engagement. And thus far, the only person who's gotten anything out of it, really, is Kim Jong-un. Legitimacy from being able to meet with President Trump on the world stage, being able to move forward with his program, even when he says he's not, and then getting the pressure lifted. Because when President Trump said, things are going well, the problem is solved, that gave China and Russia and others a green light to going back to business as usual with North Korea. And, of course, we're also getting divided from our close ally, South Korea. So this has to be refocused and recentered. And the president needs to make clear that what's happening is not going well, is not sufficient. We need to put the pressure back on North Korea and see if we can get them to actually engage meaningfully. Because right now, all of this is to North Korea's advantage.
About this new report, Max, I was just thinking, the Times was writing it today, the existence of these bases is new to the public maybe, but has long been known by American intelligence agencies. So does that mean that the president is being deceived by North Korea, or the president had this information from American intelligence agencies and he's not being straight up with the American people?
I think President Trump is deceiving himself. He's launched into this one-sided love affair where he says he's in love with Kim Jong-un and pretends that the North Korean nuclear threat is over, that North Korea intends to denuclearize. But if you actually look at what North Korea has said and done, they have never made any suggestion that they will seriously denuclearize. They've always talked about denuclearization as a process that will involve major concessions by the United States. They've never said they're going to unilaterally give up their weapons program, as President Trump has suggested. And we have had leaks before from U.S. intelligence all the summer long about how North Korea has continued to build up their missile program and their nuclear program. And Trump has ignored all that because he wants to pretend this is some kind of great diplomatic success, which is not the case.
It's fun. It would be interesting to see what would tip the scale to get him to say that things aren't going well and things need to be recentered. I'm not sure yet we've hit that moment.
I think he's desperate for a second summit with Kim Jong-un because he loved the attention he got from the first summit.
No matter what.
And so I don't think he's going to blow the whistle on North Korea before that summit takes place.
That's a good point. Tony, on a different topic, I could not help but notice you trolling the President of the United States a bit on Twitter this weekend, posting pictures of President Obama speaking in the rain, getting a Marine One in the rain. Beyond that, there was it was pretty remarkable when the French president spoke with President Trump right in front of him and what he said with him sitting right in front of him. Listen to this.
Patriotism is the exact opposite of nationalism. Nationalism is a betrayal of patriotism by saying, our interests first, who cares about the others? We erase what a nation holds dearest, what gives it life, what makes it great, and what is essential, its moral values.
Is there any way that Macron said that without knowing full well what he was doing?
No, that was a direct rebuke of President Trump and his America First nationalism. And America First, once again, is proving to be America alone. We saw that in what Macron said. We saw it in the powerful images of all of these leaders walking together in solidarity in the rain, except for Vladimir Putin and President Trump. But, Kate, the larger story here is this. I think President Trump's really missed the lesson of these couple of days in Paris. World War I was supposed to be the war that ended all wars, and of course it didn't. And part of the reason it didn't is because after World War I, we retreated. We stayed out of the League of Nations, the precursor to the United Nations. When we had economic problems, we became protectionist. When dictators started to rise in Europe, we became isolationist. When new people started to come to our country, we became xenophobic. And, of course, we wound up with a world war. After World War II, we got it right. We engaged. We led the international community in building the rules, the norms, the institutions that kept the peace for more than 7 decades. That's exactly what President Trump is moving away from now. And those who forget history, as has been said, are condemned to retweet it.
I am, though, left wondering, Max, does Macron really think this is the way to get through to President Trump? Or maybe he wasn't even speaking to him at all?
I suspect that President Macron has given up on getting through to President Trump because he tried the buddy-buddy act with him earlier on, and all it got him was a slap to the face, basically, with Trump pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal and imposing sanctions, not listening to the Europeans, pulling out of the INF treaty, again, not listening to the Europeans. And so I think Macron has probably figured that cozying up to Trump is not going to achieve anything, so he's going to tell some hard truths in front of Trump, including with the corrosive impact of nationalism, which is the doctrine that Donald Trump, let's remember, embraced only a few weeks ago.
Great to see you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it. Coming up for us, Florida isn't the only state that has races that are too close to call. There's also a race that's not over yet in Arizona. The Republican candidate for Senate there is now trailing her Democratic opponent. What's taking so long to get that one decided? What's happening there? We'll get the details next. A race too close to call, votes still being counted, and we are not talking about Florida this time. We're talking about Arizona. The Senate race there is also still too close to call, easy for me to say. Democrat Kristen Sinema has pulled into the lead, though, over Republican Martha McSally. But again, there are still a lot of votes to count. So where do things stand? CNN's political director, David Chalian, is here with me now. Great to see you, David. Talk to me about this Senate race. The president called for a new election there on Friday. That clearly does not seem to be one of the options. But what is happening there? Why is this so slow to wrap up?
Yeah, I don't understand the call for a new election. They're still just counting the votes from the election here.
Longer.
So that doesn't quite make sense. But you say why it's taking so long. Listen, so much of Arizona votes by mail and absentee ballot, and that then takes a little bit longer than just election day vote. We also know there was this issue of matching some of those mail-in ballots, the signature on the mail-in ballot. There's a deadline this Wednesday at 5 p.m. Arizona time to have that process done so that every absentee ballot will have been counted by then. But what you see there in that vote total, Kate, that 32,000 vote lead is pretty significant for Kyrsten Sinema, the Democrat. She's overtaken Martha McSally in the last couple days of that lead. And some of that outstanding vote we still think is in Maricopa County, the most populous county, but also a Sinema stronghold. So this is a warning sign for McSally. There may not be enough outstanding vote for McSally to take over, but we wait for those remaining votes to be counted right now.
We sure do. And maybe another election. Just kidding. There's a new controversy that I do want to ask you about in Mississippi, as that Senate race is now headed for a runoff. The Democrat who's running in the race responding this morning to something that the Republican candidate had said over the weekend. I want to play for our viewers what the Republican said and also the Democratic candidate's response.
Those comments that we heard that were published yesterday are very disappointing. They're hurtful and they're harmful. They're hurtful to the millions of Mississippians who are people of goodwill, and they're harmful because they tend to reinforce the stereotypes that have held back our state for so long and that have cost us jobs and have harmed our economy.
David, what's happening in this race? What impact do you think it's going to have?
You know, I'm not sure that we know exactly what impact it will have. This is a race, as you know, it's in a runoff now. November 27th is the election day. This is deep red Mississippi. But since we saw a blue wave take place over the country on Tuesday, do we see that in some way here in Mississippi? They've still got, obviously, a couple weeks to go here. I'm not sure that this will be the defining moment of this race. It seems to me it's a moment that clearly SB is going to incorporate into his campaign as he did this morning. But I think that this is still one that leans towards Republicans at the moment, Kate.
A week past Election Day, and we still have a lot of uncertainty to figure out. Great to see you, David. Thank you. No rest for you. Sorry, buddy. Coming up for us, deadly wildfires. They are still burning across the state of California.